I'd like to start by asking the significance of these talks and how close do you think we are to a solution, or how willing are the Iranians on the US side in resolving this war?
I think it's going to be very, very difficult. Clearly, there's a diplomatic path possible, but finding it at the moment when the tensions are sort of going up and down, I think is going to be very hard. And I think the whole world is looking for a solution because the economy is going to be impacted more and more and more the more this drags on.
And what role do you think Pakistan has and still could play?
And is playing. I mean, this role of mediator, of having good relations in the White House, of having good relations in Tehran, of sort of having good, strong cultural understanding with the Iranians, but also having very good communications with the United States, and really kind of reinvigorating that last year when during the 4-day war with India, the United States coming in as a sort of a diplomatic mediator then to save the situation, if you will, to bring back stability. You know, that really seemed to open the door of a new and reinvigorated relationship with the United States. So I think Pakistan stands in a very good place. And also, you know, the Iranians have had a lot of negotiations in the past, have had a lot of mediators in the past, have sort of run out of faith and trust in, let's say, European mediators. And it's really, you know, their biggest suspicion is going to be how close a mediator is to the United States. And Iran and Pakistan have a historic relationship that helps.
You were one of the few people present in Savannah last week, and you were also one of the first few journalists to ask J.D. Vance a question after the press briefer. What was that like? What was the environment like? And why do you think they were not able to reach an agreement at that point?
It's hard to know precisely why they didn't reach an agreement. I mean, we heard from the Iranians afterwards say that they felt that the goalposts had been moved, that during breaks the sides would come back and Iran would feel it had agreed to something, and this is what sort of leads, I think, where we are today, to Iran saying they really have lost trust, haven't been able to build trust with the United States. But I think what my big takeaway from that meeting was that the two sides actually did get a more common understanding of the position, sort of build a bigger plank of understanding, albeit the trust at the end wasn't there. But I think that does help going forward. And in that room, we were expecting J.D. Vance, the vice president, to walk in, and we were just waiting. It was seconds away, and those seconds stretched into minutes, into almost half an hour, and began sort of wondering, okay, what's happening? And then he walked in, and he had a slightly strange expression on his face. I suppose we all did, because everyone had been up for many, many hours. But I think we were all surprised when he said, the bad news is we haven't been able to reach an agreement. He didn't go into detail and left with that statement we're all very familiar with now, best and final offer. And at that moment you think, okay, there's a possibility things can move forward. Sort of not a surprise, but I think we'd all come to that feeling overnight that maybe, because it was going so long, there was a real closeness and it could happen, but it didn't.
And you've been in Islamabad this past week. There have been a lot of trips and more efforts towards making sure that these talks are successful. What do you make of that?
You know, I think we just have to pause and let diplomacy play out. Clearly, the tensions in the Strait of Hormuz are pretty high right now. Both sides feel it. Iran looked like it took a move following during the visit of the Field Marshal Asim Munir to Tehran for those sort of 2.5 days marathon talks in Tehran. That felt like a real positive, and Iran thanked the Field Marshal for getting this ceasefire cemented in Lebanon, and this quid pro quo seemed to be for Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz. But then the United States response didn't seem to match Iranian expectations. So we're now in that moment again where that lack of trust plays out. But I think what we've heard today from the foreign ministry spokesman in Tehran is that neither side wants war, and that they will try all tracks and efforts at diplomacy. And nobody in Tehran yet, as far as I can see, has absolutely shut the door on coming back for talks. So I think, we just sort of have to pause and wait to see if the diplomacy behind the scenes could work. I think there's so much more that happens behind the scenes than we see, that conversations are being had, ideas exchanged in real time. We have to see the product.
And zooming out a bit, how important do you think President Trump's upcoming trip to China is? And do you think he's going to try to resolve this before that?
It's really interesting because the president already delayed a trip to China because of the war with Iran. And he gave the indication there that he wanted to deal with this issue fully before he had the meeting with President Xi. And I suspect the same motivations are still in play. Obviously, the economy and the political consequences for President Trump at home are important, that if the conflict continues, the economy will do badly and he potentially loses more supporters. Going into that meeting with President Xi is just another part, I think, of the complex pressures on the most powerful man in the world to actually resolve this before he goes there. Will he delay that? Will he prevent it, an escalation because of that? I think it's all in the diplomacy that may happen here that right now seems to be happening between capitals.
And we're hearing a lot of analysis of the emergence of a new bloc in the Middle East, hopefully once all of this is over. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we're at the early stages. I think there's a lot of lessons that are going to be taken away by the Gulf countries. It's highlighted some of the potential divisions between those countries. It's also highlighted the strength, how Saudi Arabia is using its Red Sea port in Jeddah to sort of have a land line of logistics to keep all its Gulf partners supplied with whatever they need. So, in one way we're seeing an emerging unity there, but the longer it goes on, the harder it's going to be for those countries. But the lessons that are going to be learned, I think that's going to take more time to play out. It's hard to see where it all lands. But I think one lesson may be that diversification of defense strategies away from depending alone on US military deployments would seem to be almost an inevitable consequence. But again, it's too soon to say. If the United States is able to do something that the Gulf countries want, then of course that reinvigorates reliance and value in the American brand in the region.
You've been covering Pakistan and this region for a really long time. What do you make of this point in time where Pakistan stands right now? Do you think it's going to be able to preserve this new role that it has in international diplomatic circles?
It's really given Pakistan the opportunity to shine in a way that it hasn't had over recent years, decades even, and to put Pakistan in a positive light here as a mediator. And there's no reason that shouldn't translate going forward. But I think the world is an incredibly complex and busy place at the moment. For example, I spent most of January in Greenland because that was the particular hot issue at that time. Diplomacy sort of fell towards Europe at that time. I think the diplomatic value of Pakistan will hold, the world's attention will shift, but when it falls back towards this region, then Pakistan could find itself in a central position again.
Great. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.